that are here. And we are recording now. Carlos, just know we are broadcasting, but don't feel like you have to stand in front of this camera. Feel free to walk around. They should be able to hear you just fine. Started, it's worth mentioning, we worked on many items. Two significant things that we've been working on this last year is we've done two task forces that have been significant. One is the design build task force, and the other is the partnering task force. I'd like to publicly thank those individuals from ABC and both the department that have spent time to attend those meetings and offer your insight and expertise on those two items. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I wanted to just publicly thank you. I know the first design build template is out on the first project. So with that, Carlos, I think we'll give you time to you.
Mic'd up then if we're broadcasting. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Keep eating, please. And if you want more, go back for more. I really look at this. I guess I should try to stand here. Hi, Southern Utah. I guess I look at this as I want it to be more of a conversation than a presentation. And you'll see that probably from the quality of what we've put together. But please interrupt at any time, challenge, question. Really want this to be a back and forth. So that's really the only way we get better. And so I do have some prepared slides that I'm going to just kind of step through. But like I said, we can divert at any time. And Taylor, is it just the center button? Yeah. Okay. That's a laser. Maybe it's the right. It's the right button. Okay. I'm Joey. You're not the tech guy here. Okay. And it's great. I was wondering if Rich would be here, and you know, I don't know how many years we've been doing this, Rich, but it's always good to have you in the room, and thank you for your leadership. And it's just remarkable what AGC has become, and we're reminiscing where it was and where it is today. You know, 25 years ago to today, it's just remarkable, and it's really a reflection of the industry. I think of all the work that you guys do and your commitment to the industry. So I always like to start with the why. And so we're going to start with that idea of sense of purpose. And I know we all think, you know, our purpose is to build roads or build transit, but our purpose is bigger than that. Our purpose is to make a difference in people's lives. It's to make people's lives better, and it's to save lives. That's all the work we do really comes down to that. And I wanted to share with you what we call our quality of work framework. And so those are those 4 items there under what we call our mission statement, our purpose. That's the reason we exist as an organization. Those 4 things are the things that we measure. Those 4 things actually have criteria within it that we use to select projects to the Transportation Commission. We have a 7-member volunteer board commission. We don't report to them. They're independent in a sense that their job is to pick the projects that you guys build. They pick them, but we use, for those big projects, we use that quality work framework in terms of this is what we're going to prioritize projects by. And there's things within each one of those. So I mean, mobility is the typical stuff like delay, reliability, travel times. If you look at good health is things like air quality. So what are we doing to improve the quality of air in Utah? It is one of the most important things for our citizens. Year after year, they talk about that air quality as a concern for them. And I think we're all aware of that. So what do we do in the delivery of our projects and to help improve that air quality? And that's going to be something that's going to be play an ever increasing role in our business, especially as we transition to more of an electrified transportation system. We could talk more about that if you're interested. It also includes our safety measures. And I'm going to show a few safety numbers because I know we're here to talk about work and construction, but I wanted to share with you what I believe is the most important thing for all of you and all of us at the department. It's the safety of our workers and the safety of the traveling public. And I'll share a bit of numbers of that, and I'll share So in good health, we include the fatalities, the crashes, those types of things. We also include the ability for people to walk or bike to where they want to go. Because if people have an opportunity to be more active, if they can take a bike to a store as opposed to getting in a car and driving to the store, it helps improve health. And if you look at the health of communities around this country, there's a direct correlation between those that have the ability to be more active by walking and biking. They are healthier, they live longer, they lead better lives. And so we include that. That's actually one of the outcomes that we're trying to get by the projects that we ask you to build. This connecting communities piece is an interesting piece. As a transportation industry, we've been in the business of connecting from point A to point B. And it's been all about trying to get from point A to point B as fast as we can. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with then Mayor Greg Bell, so Farmington City. We were working on the environmental document for Legacy Parkway. You may have heard about that. It was a very quiet, non-controversial project. We had I'll say a very interesting, a very dynamic city council meeting. Where I was beat up pretty good by the city council, and it seemed like every member of the community was there to speak. And after that meeting, Greg Bell, who he became a state senator and then a lieutenant governor, gave me one of these things, put his arm over my shoulder as I was trying to escape out to the parking lot, and he said, "Carlos, you will not bifurcate my city." I was like, "What? What is he getting at? What does he mean?" And he already had I-15 going through his town. He had Union Pacific. We were working at that time with UTA on commuter rail. And we were talking about Legacy Parkway, which is another major highway going through his community. And he understood the purpose of it. He knew it was important, to connect northern Utah down to Salt Lake City. But it was the way that we did it that was important. He did not want to create a barrier by transportation. And this is something we've done historically around this country, is we have not necessarily paid as attention to the towns we're going through as the towns we're trying to connect. And so what we're trying to do now with every project is we're recognizing the importance of making sure that that community that the road goes through is not bifurcated. And I've had many, many conversations with Mayor Mendenhall. You may know we're working on the environmental impact statement for I-15 from Salt Lake City going up to Farmington. And Mayor Mendenhall is not all that interested in the project. She's concerned about what impacts there will be to the community, the West Side community. And that West Side community was kind of separated out by the railroad and by I-15. And it became an area that was not as well, did not have the same opportunities as the East Side. And she's really focused on making sure that the project we do actually tries to remedy some of the impacts from back in the 60s when those decisions were made about where to put I-15. Now, I-15 was basically located there because that's where the freight line was, and the freight line decision was made many years beforehand. But still, when we do our projects, we're now very focused on thinking about connecting communities as opposed to dividing communities. I think it's important for you to understand what we're trying to achieve when we do our projects. We're of course trying to create, super smooth pavements, really good bridges, good mobility, but these are the things we're also being asked by the legislature and the governor to do as well. And then strong economy. I think you all understand how important a good functioning transportation system is to the economy of the state. I've met with hundreds of businesses over the years that are either considering expanding or relocating their business to Utah. And when they come talk to me, you understand they're thinking about how important they're making an investment for 50 to 100 years in infrastructure and bringing employees in. And they want to make sure that there's a commitment to making sure the transportation system works for them. It needs to work because they need to attract employees. And if the transportation system doesn't work, they have a limited opportunity to attract employees, but they also have to get product to market. And so those four things are what we try to achieve. When every project you're working on, realize that's what we're trying to get out of it. That's our purpose as a Department of Transportation. Now, we celebrated our birthday last week on Thursday as a DOT. 114 years old we've been around. Now, we weren't always called the Utah Department of Transportation. We started as the State Road Commission, then we became Department of Engineering, then the Department of Highways. And in the 70s, we became a Department of Transportation because we were more than just moving cars and trucks. It was bigger than that. So that's our why. And I like to encourage people when you're working with people and you're asking them to do something, always start with the why, start with the purpose behind what you're trying to accomplish. People need to understand when everyone has to work to make money to support their families, but everyone wants to have a sense of purpose. They want to do something bigger than themselves. And it's amazing what people can do if they know they're working towards something that's bigger. Purpose. I want to touch on how we do things and values. And I'm sure most of you have heard me talk about this. We do a lot of things. And I care more about how we do the work than the outcome. Sure, we want to win, right? We want to have a great project. We want to finish scope, schedule, budget. That's really important. But I care more about how we went about doing the work. You know, we went about doing it in the right way. And I'll just share a story I shared. Who heard me this morning? There was a couple of you. I apologize. There's going to be a certain theme here. You've heard it before. We had the Utah Asphalt Paving Association this morning, where we got to spend some time together. We were doing a project years ago down in St. George, widening of St. George Boulevard. And we were approaching this very much. We approached every single project. It was about moving cars from one end to the other end. And so we came up with a great design and we were pushing forward with a lot of enthusiasm. And the mayor was very concerned. The city was really concerned. They didn't like what we were thinking of doing. Again, we were highway builders. We weren't community builders in our minds. And so we got a call from the mayor, Mayor McCarthy, Dan McCarthy, great guy. Went down, spent some time visit with him. Fast forward, we changed the project. We changed the design. We compromised on the big wide lanes that we wanted and the shoulders and the raised medians and all the things that we thought were the best, but this is what they needed in terms of instead of what they wanted. And the way we treat those communities is really important about getting there. And what I learned from that is how I measure success on projects now is I don't see what the schedule was or the budget was. Now, Carmen's going to probably say BS. I always talk about that. But I will ask a mayor when we're done, will you have us back again? Because how you treat people is what they remember. And it's more important than the actual transition. I guarantee you, you've experienced this. You've experienced opportunities where somebody you've had to work with, it may have been a difficult situation or even an easy one, but it was exceptional interaction. You were treated really well. They respected you. They cared about you. They acted with integrity. Those three values are what we care about at the department. And so I ask for you to be aware of those and think about when you're on the project, you're UDOT. You all represent great companies. You got it on the sides of your trucks. You're proud of that. But what's important is how we treat the people that are driving through our projects, how we treat the people that live where we're doing the projects. Because what you guys are doing is hard stuff for you, but it's really hard for them too. And so being respectful of everyone and treating them well and recognizing that they're part of this. Whether or not they're doing lifting a shovel or not, they're part of this because they're in the middle of the work zone driving through. It's really important to us. And so think about how you do things and what you stand for every day. And that's what to me is more important than anything. Let's do things in the right way. Because like I said, we've been around for a long time. We're going to be around for a long time. And we don't have the opportunity, the luxury of competition. You say, well, that's be nice not to have competition, right? Competition keeps you sharp.
It helps you recognize you need to do the right things because people have choices. Public is stuck with this. And so we have to make sure we're keeping ourselves honest and focused and doing things in the right way. And so when you work with us, recognize that this is how we measure, is how we do things. And then you've got the what, the three strategic goals. Those three things, the safety, optimizing mobility, and preserving infrastructure. Those three things are actually in state law. They're in code. We have to measure those every day. Every year we report multiple times to the legislature and to the governor in terms of how we're doing. Those are the outcomes of the work that you guys perform for us every day. And so when we talk about strategic goals, we talk about the things that are measurable. That's what we're talking about. And I'm going to just spend a few minutes here on some safety discussion here. Every Monday morning, I get an email. Get another one on Thursday to see how we're doing, but it's basically a summary of what's happening out on the roadways. Now, Monday, I had my email that I got was 54 fatalities. That's on all public roads. You may look at that and say, well, that says 56. 2 fatals yesterday during the day. We're down from last year. And last year was down from the year before, but the year before was higher than we've seen in a long, long time. And it's a remarkable when you look at, what we've been through. We all kind of are going to measure this period in time of before COVID, and after COVID, right? And before COVID, our fatality numbers were going down. And we really thought there was a chance we could get to under 200 fatalities in the state of Utah. We felt like we were going in that direction. That sounds like, I hope you think that sounds like a lot of people. It's been since 1958 since we were down to 200 fatalities. And then COVID hit, and people seem to lose their minds. I am serious. They were driving faster. They were driving more impaired, and I got some slides to show that. It's just crazy what happened in 2020 with fewer cars on the road. And like I said, 21 wasn't good, but it was a little better than 2020. And hopefully we're going to continue to beat last year's numbers. But at the end of the day, we got to get to 0 fatalities. We got to figure how nobody is going to pass. On Saturday, I had a text message from a friend who I've known for a long, long time, and her husband I've known for even longer. He was chief of staff for when Al Mansell was president of the Senate. And she texted me that she said, I've been waiting, I didn't know what to do, but my niece got in a crash on the way home from school right before Christmas on US 6 and passed. And I've been struggling of whether or not I should call you. And so I said, Allie, let me look into that crash and I'll give you a call back on Monday. And I pulled the accident report. It's a lot of information that it's confidential information. You can understand why. And it's just tragic how that crash happened. And, she's very focused on trying to make sure it never happens again to any single person. But when you think about, there's a story behind every single fatality. And every single one is it's a son, a daughter, a brother, a father, an uncle. And I would submit those of you that have been in this business probably have those stories and know those people that have lost their lives. And so it's so important for us to be thinking about every day, what are we doing to protect our workers and the people on the roadways? Driving is the most dangerous thing any one of you do. And I guarantee you, when you get into your vehicle, you're not thinking like, if you're about to climb Yosemite, rock climb it, you're probably, rightfully so, thinking this is pretty scary, dangerous. You're probably not thinking that what you're doing when you're getting into your car. But it's the single most dangerous thing any one of us will do. But we don't think about it. We don't think about safety and driving in that way. And we really need to.
Okay, so breaking it down a little bit. So this is the types of fatalities we've had over the last 3 years. And, you know, what I want to point out is the jump we had last year in pedestrian fatalities. And obviously bicyclists a little bit more, motorcyclists as well. Those 3 categories make up what are referred to as vulnerable road users. Those are the users that don't have a lot of protection around. And when they interact a vehicle, the outcomes are usually pretty bad. Now, like I said, 22 is better than 21. We got an asterisk there on 22 because it takes months to finalize the data and get all of the reports from every single hospital and all of the police reports standardized across all the jurisdictions. We have to make sure that we have consistency in the way things are reported because you have, you know, officers with different experiences, different backgrounds, and so we need to normalize all of those. But you can kind of see where we're sitting right now. So we're paying particular attention to the vulnerable road users. We're seeing more people wanting to walk and bike, and obviously more motorcyclists. They're harder to get to, the motorcyclists. They seem to have a higher risk tolerance than a lot of people in the way they operate around vehicles. Vehicles cannot see a lot of the motorcyclists in the way they operate, even though they have amazing performance characteristics, they struggle with that. So I want to show you a little bit on how these break down in terms of behaviors. So these are the 5 behaviors. So 94% of all crashes in this country can be attributed to one of these behaviors or multiple ones of these behaviors. And the bottom, the least 3, the ones to the farthest right, those are the hardest ones for law enforcement to come in after a crash and attribute that risk behavior to. So I believe those are underrepresented. But you can see we are, you know, if you look around the country, we're still doing pretty well. Our fatality rate, so this is the amount of fatals per 100 million miles of travel, is still under 1.0. Last year we were at 0.98. We're sitting now, I think, at 0.93. So the national goal is to get to 1.0. So we're doing well in Utah. And so, I mean, we could sit back and say we're doing better than anyone else. We're not quite doing better than anyone else, but we don't have to worry. But we're not going to do that. But if you look at the driving under the influence, this is alcohol and drugs. We've been seeing an increase in Utah over the last 10 years in driving under the influence. And we've benefited from our local culture where we don't really celebrate drinking as much as in other places, but it's changing. And we're seeing an increase in the level of being under the influence. It's remarkable how drunk some people are. And what's also being observed is there's more and more combinations of people drunk and drugs, both in their system. And that should scare us all to think about the numbers of people that are operating out there that we don't know. More people driving impaired on our roads. So how can we prevent this? How can we try to mitigate for that? And the next piece I want to touch on here is seatbelts. 2015, we, with the help of the AGC, it was just a remarkable effort. The legislature passed a primary seatbelt law. Before that, you could get pulled over for having a broken brake light, but you couldn't get pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt. It was a secondary offense. After 2015, Governor Herbert signed the bill, and it is a primary offense. We saw seatbelt compliance go from about 82, 83% of Utahns would wear seatbelts. Last year were at 92%, which is pretty cool. It's a good improvement. But if you look at that, 89 people unrestrained. I'm sorry, it's right here too. I'm looking at this one. You look at that.
If you take out the bicyclists, the pedestrians and the motorcyclists, they don't have seatbelts. Out of the fatality total, about 43% of those fatalities were not wearing seatbelts. So 8% of our population is making up about 43% of the fatalities. We could make a huge improvement if everyone wore a seatbelt. It's the easiest thing to do. It's the thing that I'm sure everyone in this room does every single time you get in the room, into your car. And I'm sure you make sure every one of your family members is wearing a seatbelt every single time. And so these are the 5 behaviors we keep coaching on. We are almost in every high school right now with our Zero Fatalities campaign. We spend an hour and a half with new drivers. Drivers get their permit, and we ask that they bring at least one parent. And we spend an hour and a half with them. About 5 behaviors and how they can be safe drivers. We're working on getting into every single high school so we can have that conversation. Because that's where we need to focus, is, I believe, is on the new drivers and develop those good driving behaviors. Okay, you can see the trends on seatbelts here. You know, we saw that increase in fatalities. The 2015 bill did not become effective until January of 2016. So we at that jump in 21. Look at that. Seatbelts. I think COVID, there was so much uncertainty. I'm guessing here, I don't have the science behind this. I think there was so much uncertainty in people's lives. People started taking risks that they might not have taken before. And I'm hoping we're transitioning out of that craziness. Okay. Away from safety. It's a simple line. I asked that they start this because, you know, I moved to Utah in 1980. Myself and 4 friends, we graduated college. And we convinced ourselves that it was important to go skiing out west. I grew up on the East Coast. It was important to go skiing out west for 1 year after college. It'll help round you out. And we'll go right back and we'll get to start my career. So we moved out west. I got a job at Snowbird. Met my wife there. She was from the East Coast and never left. But the point here is our population in 1980 was just under 1 million people. We're sitting 3.3, 3.4 million people right now. You kind of see, so we're kind of in the middle of that graph. You don't see much change in that projection. This Chem Gardner, they do some really good work looking at how Utah is going to grow. I'm guessing most of you think Utah is pretty different than it was 10 years ago. I think it's remarkable how much it's changed in 40 years that I've been here. But it's not going to slow down. It's not going to slow down. And what most of you know is 65% of our lands in Utah are owned by the federal government. We're not building businesses or homes there. Another 10% is owned by state and local government. So we've got 25% of our land available for us to live on, to work on. That's important because that means Utah is actually an urban state. We are the 8th most urbanized state in the country. I'm sure most of us do not think of Utah as an urban state, but most of our population lives in an urbanized area. And the other point to realize is, as we will double in population here, that extra growth is all going to be in the same place. And we're not going to be able to double the lane miles that we have out there for roads. Think about it. Where would we put them? We have a lot of roads out there now. We have a lot of homes. Think about the space we live in right now and doubling the people. Utah's going to change a lot. It's going to look a lot different. We're going to be denser. We're going to be more vertical. And we're going to be traveling differently. We're going to continue to build as many roads as we can. We have projects on the long range plan. You guys are working on those right now. But we're also going to be in the transit business. Last year, the legislature passed a bill and said, they said, we recognize that we're going to have to add transit to the mix. But we want to make sure that the people that are delivering those projects are within arm's reach. So they asked UDOT to now be a transit. And so we're doing capital transit delivery. So we've got money for front runner. We're doing an environmental study for a light rail BRT system down at Point of the Mountain. So we're going to be doing and building transit, and it's going to be a bigger part of our future. So that's a change. And the other change is a bill that passed this session that I wanted to touch on is the Utah Trail Network. This was a big part of Governor Cox's budget. And it's because he recognized how fast we're growing and how important it is that we have our three systems connected as one transportation system: roads, transit, and trails. And so the idea is the cities and counties have done a lot of work on building trails. The idea here is basically to build what some people hate it when I say this, but build what I call the interstate of trail systems to connect all of those other trail systems together. These will be paved trails throughout the state to try to connect all the things together. So to connect city centers with our churches, with our schools, with our open spaces. And yes, connecting them to recreation trails as well, but creating this third piece, the third leg of the stool for Utah's transportation system. So we're standing up, we stood up, we just announced a new leader of the department, senior leader, Josh Van Jura. He's now what we call a group leader, and he's going to have multiple divisions. He's going to have a transit division, and he's going to have a active transportation division reporting to him. He'll be staffing that up with the money, and I'll talk about the money here coming up in a minute. And then working with local partners to try to figure out exactly what this looks like and how we can implement that. So we're pretty excited about this. I know the governor is going to have a ceremonial bill signing. He's already signed the bill because there was a piece in that bill that we needed to have active right away. Because we were overseeing safety of zip lines and we needed to pull that piece out. That's a long story on that, but zip lines are not part of this presentation. So Utah Trail Network, this is going to be something I believe that in 50 years will make Utah stand out from every state in the country because of the work on this. It's going to make Utah different. People will want to come to you. Well, maybe we don't want them to. People will want to come to Utah and experience this because it will be significantly different. It will not be this piecemeal of a trail here, a trail here, a trail here. We're going to be connected together. And so I'm really excited about this piece. Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts here. Okay, let's start with one that it was an interesting bill. So in 2015, got our first gas tax increase. And those that heard my presentation this morning, I kind of talked around what drove that, but it was the condition of our low volume roads. And I've talked about that here prior with AGC. And part of that gas tax increase was a 5-cent increase, but it included an indexing provision. And it basically said that the price per gallon would go up based on how CPI went. You guys may have noticed prices going up pretty fast in the last couple of years, huh? Well, what that meant was the tax on gas went from 31.9 to 36.4 January 1 of this year. The legislature was concerned about two things. There was a large group of legislators that wanted to kill the indexing provision, get rid of it. And because it was a flag, all of a sudden it went up way faster than it was anticipated, and it became this flag that said, we can't have that. That's a tax increase without represent, without us voting. And so Representative Schultz, keep an eye on this. He's incredibly strategic. He said, I want to keep the indexing because that's important for transportation. Let's figure out a way to pull back some of his more conservative members off that cliff of trying to kill the indexing and figure out a way we can be more methodical about it. So you can see the outcome of the bill. We spent hours and hours trying to figure out a formula that we could guarantee would kind of moderate the rate. But at the end of the day, the compromise was what you see here, those increases. So in July, the money we receive from the gas tax will go down to 34.5. From 36.4 to 34.5. And so what I tell people, it's a decrease in the increase. Kind of a politician now, I guess. It's a decrease in the increase. But then look where it does next January 1. And then we've basically hardwired the increases in. And it was just one of these things. It was late at night. What about if we increase the cap? Representative Schultz says, yeah, I think I can get that through. And so you can see we were capped at 40 cents and he took the cap to 42 cents. So this increase in the gas tax rate is good news for all of us because this money goes into the transportation. This is the money that we use to put out projects and to pay our people. So this was a big deal. Now, the other thing they did was they increased the vehicle registration fee. It was going to be $5, and that was to try to mitigate the cut in the gas tax. But then at the last minute, there was an effort to bring more money to rural Utah. And so that $2, the extra $2 is going to be distributed. We distribute what's called the B and C money. So money that goes into the transportation fund, 70% of that comes to UDOT, 30% we distribute to all the cities and counties based on an incredibly ridiculous formula that has been negotiated over the years. We do every 2 months, we send that to the cities and counties. The counties, so 3rd class through 6th class, those are based on population. So think basically every county, say Utah County, no, Washington County is a 3rd class county. So the more rural parts of the state are going to have about a $40 million distribution. Every 2 months, they're going to get money distributed to them from that extra $2. So cities and counties in rural Utah will have more money to spend on transportation. We don't oversee how they spend that. We just have to say, tell the legislature, yes, it is spent on transportation, and they all do it differently. And then there was this tax on the retail sale of electricity. So if you're driving an electric vehicle and you're charging at home, you won't see any increase. But if you're charging at a place that's charging you the charge, then you will pay this extra, 12.5 cents. So it was a fairly complex bill. And as all bills that are complex and a little controversial, it goes through a lot of iterations to get to the end. But at the end of the day, this was a bill the governor supported, wanted to moderate the increase in the gas tax to the public, but it also preserved the growth in our transportation fund. So I thought you might be interested in that. Okay, so this will be an interesting bill for us to watch. We don't know what's going to happen on this until 2024. So there'll be a so you're shaking your head. There's been effort for a long time to remove the sales tax on food. The compromise, the bill they were able to get out was a removal of the sales tax on food if we as a public during the 2024 election vote on a constitutional amendment to basically eliminate the earmark in education. So all of the income tax by our state constitution goes to education. The legislature doesn't like to have that, I'll say, limitation on where that money can be spent. They want that removed. So they'll remove the sales tax. Well, we can, as a public, remove the sales tax on food if we agree to eliminate the earmark on education. So I guess what I'll say to this is, so the reason I bring it up is because a decrease in the sales tax on food is a decrease in money going to the transportation investment funds, a decrease in money going to construction. So I bring that up, get yourself educated on this. Figure out what policy you like. You've got about 1.5 years to figure it out. I imagine you'll see commercials and people providing you with information on which way to vote. But as a member of the voting public, you need to make a good decision on which way to go on this. But it's something to keep an eye on. Again, a very interesting bill. And of course, our income taxes were reduced, and the average Eton should see a decrease of about $200 a year in their income tax. Okay, this is what I talked about earlier. So this is the B and C fund. I can get into more detail on the B and C fund, but this is just how they're going to distribute it. So it's that ongoing money, that extra $2 per vehicle of vehicle registration. Plus there was $40 million of one-time money that come July 1 we'll be able to distribute out to those cities and counties. And so that's more money, like I said, to construction. Okay. I don't have a lot more slides, and then I want to have a conversation with you guys. This is ongoing money for mostly construction. Most of this money goes out for projects. The only portion that isn't 100% is that 23.6. That's the transportation fund. And I can show about of that, I would say $180 million of that goes out to construction contracts. But that's also where we pay for the employees. That's where we pay to plow the roads. That's where we buy the salt from, where we buy our equipment from. So that comes out of that as well. But that's the gas tax vehicle registration in the piece in orange. You can see our federal fund portion is about 20% of our budget. This is the ongoing money, the money we would get every single year. This is what we call base budget. So the big blue transportation investment fund, that's major capacity projects, 20.68% of the statewide sales tax. Completely unique. No other state has anything similar to this. 20.68% of your sales tax goes into the transportation investment. Has to be used for capacity projects at least over $5 million. So most of these are the big construction jobs. And we've programmed that out through 2030. So we have that list of projects. I'm sure Carmen has shared that list of projects with all of you that are programmed out that we're working on, either getting into design, construction, either environmental, all of that is work in progress. But that's the major side of our budget. Like I said, the oranges, those tend to be the pavement preservation jobs, the bridge preservation jobs, a lot of what we call transportation solution jobs. So smaller projects throughout the state. The 6.8% is a bunch of different projects that we're showing there. We have a small, what we call transit transportation fund. Those are, we do grants. So local governments or a transit district has to match our grant 40%. They have to match it to 40. And we provide 60%. And so that's for transit systems that add capacity. So we're invested in building the BRT system. It's called the Mid-Valley BRT system. So connecting the front runner at Intermountain Health, going to the community college, going by our office that we call the complex, and then connecting to the light rail at West Valley City. And there's about 20 projects that we've given grants to throughout the state out of that transit investment fund. Very complicated mechanism, but I could go through it if anyone's interested on how that money gets there. You can see the dark blue in that 6.8, the active transportation. The legislature funded it at $45 million ongoing. So we're gonna have $45 million every year to build this interstate of trails, Utah Trails Network, paved trails. We got some one-time money that I'll talk about later for that one as well. Now, it's interesting, the bill, if you dig into the statute, it says 5% of the transportation investment fund. But they capped it. 5% of transportation fund would have been about 54 million. They said, no, let's put it at 45, get the project going, get people excited, and then we could remove the cap if it's really going well. So that's the transportation investment fund. And then we've got Cottonwood Canyons. Some folks may want to talk about the Cottonwood Canyons. That's a very mild and underspoken about effort environmental document that we're working on. They provided $100 million for that project, but they also authorized $50 million out of what's called the Cottonwood Canyon Transportation Investment Fund. So we have $150 million of capital to move forward with what we call phase one in the Cottonwood Canyon. So we expect to issue a record decision summer on the Little Cottonwood EIS. What we were going to do with the 150 is the phase one would be to buy probably 50, 60 buses. We would build a mobility center at the mouth of Big Cottonwood, think probably 2,000, 3,000 car spaces. We would toll Big Cottonwood and Little Cottonwood. And we would build bus stations on the road for all 4 resorts. So right now, if you ski and you take the bus has to go through the parking lots. The parking lots are a nightmare. It's just crazy. We need these buses to be leaving every 5 minutes for each resort. So if you're going to Solitude, there's a bus going up every 5 minutes and there's a bus coming down from Solitude. It's not going up to Brighton. There's another bus that goes every 5 minutes up to Brighton. There's another bus that goes every 5 minutes to Dalton. There's another one that goes up to Snowbird every 5 minutes. That's the kind of bus service we're envisioning for this phase one. Now, we are not bus operators, and we don't even want to play one on TV. So our vision is we're going to look to contract this out. UTA may or may not want to compete for that contract. We will pay the operating costs as well as buy the capital. So that's the vision for the Cottonwood Canyons. Everything I said, we think is about $200 million. We got $150 million. We're a little short. We're going to have to scale it a little, probably in terms of how many buses we buy. That's the plan. We'll see how that plan goes. Then we have a small rural transit program and a aeronautics program. Some of you may compete against for the taxiways, the runways that we do. There's 46 local airports around the state. We own some of them, but mostly we work with the local governments that own them to do the infrastructure work at those airports. So that's our ongoing money that we have. I will say that $2 billion is kind of a lot of money. When I started at the department, that was under 300 million. So our transportation budget has grown much faster than even our population has grown. So we're trying hard in Utah to keep the transportation working. I'll touch on this. I think this is the last slide, but I'm not sure. This is the one-time money. So when the legislature has extra money, but they're not sure it's going to be there every year, they fund one-time stuff. That's why they like transportation stuff. A lot of other departments in the state, when they start something, it takes ongoing money. Think about if you start a new program and you have to hire employees, you really need to guarantee you're going to be able to pay them next year, right? But projects are a good place to spend one-time money. So the legislature likes to send money to transportation. $800 million is interesting. So we've got outstanding right now $1.7 billion in debt. That means a portion of that TIF that I showed you on the last slide Right, next year, 2024, our debt payment's $324 million. That's money not going to construction. And the legislature said, hey, let's try to pay down debt. Now, we don't have early call provisions on our bonds. We have bonds, we're going to make bond payments through 2035. And this will pay just about 3 years worth of our debt. So we're going to free up about $300 million each year for extra to move projects forward and advance them. So as you think about that list of projects that Carmen has shared. Carmen, do you share that list that I'm talking? Okay, thank you. No pressure. You're thinking about, we're going to be moving forward a pretty good sized chunk of it and wanting to accelerate that. Because July is coming pretty fast. And that's a lot of extra money available here for next fiscal year. So that's what that $800 million is. Now, I'll do a pause on that because they did something I've never seen before this year. And there was an obvious disagreement amongst legislative leadership and the legislative fiscal analyst office about how much Utah's economy was going to continue to grow. There was the optimist and there was the pessimist. The optimist must have been our legislative leadership. It's the legislative fiscal analyst office job to be concerned. Our leaders, and I can't tell you how lucky we are to have people like President Adams, former transportation commissioner, Representative Mike Schultz. Those are the two kingpins in funding transportation. But they obviously feel optimistic about Utah's economy. And so they put a provision in the bill, this piece that says, in day 10 of the 2024 legislative session. Now, it's hard for me to even say that. It's because it's exhausting to go through a legislative session. It's exhausting to come out of it now to try to figure out what the heck they did and to implement it. And now I'm already talking about 2024. But in day 10, what they do in day 10 of legislative sessions, they pass the base budgets for all departments. Remember I showed you the ongoing money, that's base budget stuff? They pass the base budget. So in day 10, now this is if the economy continues to grow, if the optimists work, they have put in $1.2 billion to pay off the rest of our debt. That will free up an awful lot of money every year going forward. And so I think it's remarkable. I love the idea that we're trying to knock debt down. And so what they'll do is they'll take that money, ask the treasurer to invest it, and every year the treasurer will send us that debt payment so we can pay our debt, and it won't come out of our ongoing budget. That's a lot of extra money going to transportation. You can see the 45 million on top, so I'll say 1130 to 12 there. That's an extra 45 million for the Utah Trails Network. So $90 million this year. Josh better get moving really fast to figure out what this thing looks like and what those projects are. Governor wants to cut ribbons on projects really, really fast. Legislators and governors want to get credit for the stuff they do. And those of you that have been part of helping us do these things, I know you probably roll your eyes at us when we ask you to kind of hold things down and let's do a groundbreaking or let's do a ribbon cutting. It's a pain in the butt, I know it. But gosh, it goes a long, long ways. We got to give credit to the people that send us the money. And that's what it's about, is finding ways to do that. The $100 million that was for the Cottonwood Canyons. That was that $100 million for Cottonwood Canyons. The other money was the ongoing money that I showed you. And so this is one-time money to match the ongoing money that they pulled out of the existing fund. Then $200 million for Front Runner, that gray right there. And so that's basically a station, Front Runner station at Point of the Mountain. So think about where the prison property is. That prison property is being redeveloped. It's going to become an innovation center along with a lot of high-tech stuff is what the governor is really pushing for. And so we're going to build a Front Runner station there, and we're going to have to do more double tracking of Front Runner going south. We've got 370 million already set aside. And we're working on the environmental document for that double tracking of front runner. So that's going to be $570 million set aside for double tracking and this new station. We need a couple $100 million more. Plus, we've applied for a $600 million from the federal government. There's a lot of money in grants for commuter rail. This is a time to strike. Whether you like this administration or not, they like trains. And so we are going to go and fish for as much money as we can and bring it back to Utah. And so that commuter rail project, that front running project, we're not sure how we're going to do it. Is it going to be one project? Is it going to be multiple projects? But it's going to be about probably a $1.2 billion project for double tracking front runner and building that extra station. So a lot of work going on in that area. Our goal with the front runner project is basically to take it from right now in peak periods, you have 30-minute service. So every 30 minutes in the peak period, you can get on the commuter rail. Our goal is to get in the peak periods down to every 15 minutes. So when you get to 15 minutes, people don't look at schedules. You're willing to just show up and know that somewhere in that 15-minute window, your train will be there. Off peak, we're going to go to 30 minutes. So we're going to make this, its frequency is the driver behind helping people make the choice to use the train versus drive. As many people that are willing to take the train, the better it is for our roadways. And so this is a really big part of our program, is helping move that forward. And then you can see, we listed a couple of there's 120, very precise number, 124, 992, 800. Other projects as outlined by the legislature. I'll just point out 191. That is the Indian Canyon. So the road from US 40 in Duchesne up over the hill, down into, drops over into Helper. And the oil traffic right now is, I think we're looking at about every 15 minutes, there's an oil tanker. It used to be the oil fields in the basin could supply the refineries here, and there was nothing extra. The refineries are maxed out here, the 4 refineries that we have here in Utah. And so we're sending the oil down to the Gulf Coast. The Gulf Coast has refineries that were built for refining the Venezuela crude, which is very similar to the waxy crude we're pulling out of the basin. And so they're being trucked from the basin up over Indian Canyon and down to US 40, where they're loaded in the trains and shipped down to the Gulf Coast. We expect those super tankers to be running 5 to 6 minute intervals here, not too long. So we've got $88.5 million worth of passing lane improvements that we're going to be putting out the contract here as fast as we can because of how much work is taking place in the growth of the basin. And so that's kind of the big project there. You could see the other ones are smaller projects that the legislature earmarked. I think that's the last slide I have. It's the last slide I have. So what can I answer? What input can you give me?
Movement.
So where you work, because I got phone calls. True, we're struggling. I've never seen a market like this. We're paying a CDL driver with construction certs, because we call them transportation technicians. We move construction and maintenance back and forth because we don't have enough people. We start them at $17.60 an hour. When you're driving by a McDonald's and you see them starting offer at $20 an hour, and you know that our folks are being called out, 24/7, it's tough to attract people. And so they made some progress. We're struggling with how to execute it fairly because they just don't do things in a simple way. They made some progress. They're committed to continue trying to make progress. We're never planning to try to keep up with, to be equal with the market. We can't be that fast or flexible. But we need to find ways to pay our tradespeople more, our mechanics, just our region 2. So when we talk about region 2, that's our Salt Lake, Tooele, and Summit County offices. We normally have a staff of 13 mechanics to keep our equipment running. We have 2. Think about, I don't know if any of you have been in a plow and felt the damage that does to an equipment. It beats those trucks up like you can't believe. It's constant maintenance on those trucks and repairs. We have 2. Rocky Mountain Power hired away our 3rd one. He was being paid $26 an hour, hired him away at 46. It's a tough market. We have a ways to go. We're struggling with engineers. That's why, honestly, that's why we start with purpose. When I started here, we can offer what I believe is a good culture, a good atmosphere. We can offer some flexibility, and we want to offer a sense of purpose, doing something for the community. And we're trying to focus on that because we're never going to be able to stand up on the numbers of salary. And so, yeah, we got to keep working on it. But I was talking to a CEO of a large consulting company back east yesterday, and they're wondering of whether or not to come into our market. And he was asking how we're doing on employee retention and attraction. And I said, it's a struggle. He says, we want to work with owners that have expertise. We don't want to work with an owner that doesn't have that expertise. It's like, well, I think we're pretty good. Anyhow, yeah, thank you for that. And we're in this together. I mean, I begrudge nobody in our organization to do better by their family. And if they, and it's different than it used to be. We used to have a pension. And I called that the golden handcuffs. When you're young, you don't have any idea what a pension is. It doesn't mean anything to you. But usually after 10 years, you start to think about, you bought a home, got your family kind of stable. And all of a sudden you say, hey, wow, that's a pretty cool thing. Well, 2012, they took the pension away. So we're transient and moving back and forth a little bit more. And we just recognize that. We're going to set up our training programs so we can give employees that kind of just-in-time training for the job. Because I don't think we're going to have that 35, 40-year vet that has, been out there on every bridge deck, half the state. We're just not. It's just the way it is. Thank you. What else? Bob.
Any update on the flood?
Governor Cox is pretty perceptive, I gotta say. It was early February. And it was late at night, and he sends out this email to a couple of us saying, we should start thinking about getting prepared for flooding. And I kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, we're just trying to keep the snow off the road and move forward. And yeah, we're getting more nervous. We are standing up emergency procedures right now. We have about a month ago, we ordered 1.5 million sandbags. I got a picture this morning of all of them in the warehouse. And we're going to start distributing those around the state based on what we see as risk. And so between us, the Department of Public Safety and the local governments, we're trying to anticipate where flooding could occur. Now, if you look at the snowpack and the water equivalent in the snowpack, we're higher than we were in '83. And if you remember '83, it was remarkable. Everyone talks about State Street. I think about Great Salt Lake, waves breaking over I-80. We did an emergency grade raise on I-80 of 8 feet to raise it up there by salt air. So it was we're at a different time. The lake was higher at that time, when we got that big 83 snowfall. But it's all to be dependent on how fast or how we cool down or warm up. And, that's what I'm paying attention to now is the temperatures as much as the moisture. It's going to be cool. I mean, even though today feels like spring, it was in the low 40s. It's going to be cool for the next at least week and a half. We plan on feeling moisture. But if by the second week of April, we're not warming up and, hitting those 60 degrees, 70-degree days down in the valley, it's going to come down way too fast. And we are going to have flooding. And so that's one of the things we worry about. We have we have what we call line items. And what was Taylor? What was the keys I had? My tech guy's gone. Was it Alt Tab?
To go back to the, yeah.
That's an Alt Tab. Oh. Now you broke it, Joey. Jeez. Back to that web. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay. These are the guy in the stylish pants got it. I knew it was a new AGC when I walked in here, Dre. I love it. Okay, so these are our different funds. This is our website. You guys, anyone can go to this website. But this is 2024 fiscal year. So this is what the legislature budgeted us as. And I'm just going to go to the transportation fund. And so you can see that's 479. Okay, now I'm going to go to revenue. Well, it's open. Okay. Yeah, this is where the revenue comes from. And you can see gas tax at 488. That's the big one here. But let's go over to expenditures. Because I wanted to point something out. This over here, so your left is what is called our line items. So the legislature puts money in those different categories. That pays for about 700 people. It pays for all of our materials and maintenance operations, salt, buys all of our equipment, also pays for all our construction people. They're all in that lineup. I can't move money. Only the legislature. We're about $34 million in expenses for snow this year. We budgeted probably 25, 26. And so we're eating into the work we would be doing normally in May and June in terms of doing maintenance repairs of our guardrail, our signs, and the gates, pothole fixes. These are small jobs that we don't put out to contract. We do with our people. We're running out of that money. So we're watching that really, really tightly right now on a daily basis. And what ends up happening is if we get too low, we go to labor intensive activities. We can't even, because we charge ourselves every time we turn the camp truck to recover. We won't be able to turn on our trucks. We won't be able to buy equipment. So we go to labor. So, the old timers, we're going to go out and straighten delineators, straighten the delineators. And the guys love it. So we're watching that really closely, but we've got a couple $1 million pigeonholed right now for landslides and flooding. And so that's what we're trying to do is we're trying to manage that money. If it keeps snowing, you're going to see me ask the governor to call a special session for the legislature back to move some money so that we can keep working and we can respond to flooding. But yeah, we are starting to get nervous about it. All depends on how fast it gets. Gradual warming is great. Start to bring this down. If you haven't been up at the high elevations, it's a little daunting how much snow is on. Else, yeah. But it's on the news, it doesn't. So it has, you know. Obligation is small. It's coming from those federal things. But it's gonna be hard to change that. See that. So the glass half full is saying. That basic best use. It's a. Yeah, I mean, it used to be the donor-donee issue with federal money. And you'd have large states, you know, the Californias, Texas, the New Yorks, basically be donors. They'd be putting more money, sending more money to Washington. Now, we sent it to them, and they sent it back with all these rules around it. Harder for local governments. I could go on for a couple hours, but so when they decided to build the interstate, you know, they first thought they tried to build the interstate by tolling it. They couldn't get that through Congress, so they established the trust fund, and that was made up of federal gas taxes. And those gas taxes were basically going into a lockbox. They were going in, and they could only be used for transportation. Now, the gas tax was diverted about, I'm gonna be wrong on this percentage, but only by about 2.5% of the gas tax would go to the Federal Transit Administration and would go back out to states and to transit districts for transit projects. There was a small percentage that's pulled off the top to operate the modal agencies, so the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. Then the rest of that was distributed out to the states. And we, for years, and I've testified to Congress multiple times in this prior period, do not open that door and allow the trust fund dollars to be spent on things other than transportation. Well, Congress didn't have the willpower to actually, when they started bringing less money in by gas taxes than they had been spending before, because vehicles are getting more fuel efficient. Less money generated from gas tax. But they didn't say, okay, we're going to cut back what we send to states. What they did is they did a lot of financial gimmickry, and they basically have been opening the trust fund door and sending money in. And we have been very happy to say, great, give us that money. So the trust fund is busted, in my opinion. And you can never go back on this. Congress has a major problem to try. Now they can choose to deficit spend, and I don't know how long they can do that. Or they can decide that they're going to get back to this fiscal discipline of having a lockbox and spending the money, the user's fees, the money generated from transportation, and using that for transportation. But we're in a precarious position right now because there's not really a connection anymore between the use and where the money goes. But we're complicit in the highway industry because we like the more money. But I believe it will be something that will come back and bite us. That's pleasant news. We need a better question to end on a higher note. Nothing? Okay, well, oh, good. Do you see that? Yeah. 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 Well, no, the other transportation piece will grow because the interest is pretty phenomenal already. I mean, had a conversation with one of the leaders. It took a bit of conversation to have, to convince that person that this was the right thing to do. And the night of the final session, of the final night of the session, he called me up twice, asking about different projects. I said, you see, isn't this a good idea? So I think if we can get them out, excited around it, and then they can take that cap off, and then after. Yes, there is absolute agreement in the legislature that the investment in transit has to. Because of that growth. We're either going to say we accept congestion and not being able to get around. What does that mean? That means we impact our quality of life. Remember how I started? That's purpose things. Or we're going to invest more in transit. They want to invest more in transit. They've been able to do it with one so far. And we have that small piece that is what we call, let me see if they built this curve in. This is, I haven't even looked, this was the new website for the 2024 fund that they just finished last night. So they should show it in, put my glasses on, I can see. Okay, they did. See that nice triangle at the bottom? That's where the ongoing money for capital transit development comes from. It's basically built on the growth in the CPI of gas. And since constitutionally we can't spend gas tax on transit, we send that growth in the transportation investment fund, we free up sales tax, and we spend the sales tax on transit. That formula will have to change to increase the amount we invest in transit. But I believe it will have, yes. Hey. Just Joe.
We appreciate as an agency the relationship and partnership. We have a department that work very well with our.
Joe, when you have it, we are the luckiest DOT in the country because we have the best contractors in the country. And I say that, I'm not BSing you guys on that. We have, I think, something that's unique in this country. And it's our currency. And I believe we have a level of trust that I hope we can continue to grow. So I think what we need to do, all of us need to do things, we act with the values. We are straight up with each other. We don't hide behind something. When I screw up, I want to hear it straight to my face. I really don't want to hear it behind my back. And that's what I ask. We all do that, is we have those hard conversations because we respect each other face to face. Because if we are getting along well, if we're building great projects and we're doing it in the right way, the legislature is going to continue to want to fund these projects. I had a conversation after I did my talk today at the asphalt paving conference. And Reed, who runs the association, said, we've got it really good here. In fact, I was talking to my counterpart in Montana. And they had their conference, and there was a fist fight between the DOT and some of the contractors. Fist fight. I don't know. I don't know, but let's take our differences out on a golf course or on a run or something, but yeah, I mean, I think, Joey, it's just continue to do what we're doing, continue to respect each other and tell each other BS when we need to say BS, tell us the truth when we're screwing up. And we will commit to being honest and always fair. And that's all I think we can ask. And I think the future is just tremendously positive for transportation in Utah. We're very, very lucky in Utah. I mean, obviously with the growth, our growth switch, we used to be 2/3 internal growth. We're 2/3 external. That's a big change. People want, and I think that's a good thing. It means we have a good thing going. Let's keep it going. So thank you, guys.
Chat with you real quick.
Yes, sir.
Certain